Well, hey there, my friends. I want to do a discussion of a couple books, I guess a review that I've read this year that are Chef's Kiss, and I'm really excited to tell you about them. They are not, I should say, tarot related, so know that going in, but they do fit in this sort of magical space, a thing that I never talk about. So these are there's two. It was three books actually, but really two. So they're from a new publisher, or I don't know if it's a new publisher, but it's a publisher I have not heard of before, North Atlantic Books. And they have an interesting story. I don't know if it's about North Atlantic Books. North Atlantic Books is a 501c3 nonprofit publisher committed to bold exploration of the relationships between mind, body, spirit, culture, and nature. So founded in 1974. Okay, so it's not now. NAB aims to nurture a holistic view of the arts, sciences, humanities, and healing. So I haven't heard of North Atlantic Books before, but they have two books this year that I think are amazing, and I love them. So obviously they are New Moon Magic, and New Moon Magic is by Risa Dickens and Amy Torok, and then Hoodoo for Everyone by Sherry Schoen. So I'm gonna come back to that one in a second. And there's probably many of you who are like, "Oh my God, what are you doing talking about Hoodoo on this channel?" We'll get there, okay? So not a thing to worry about. And I say that because people who think it's a closed practice, but I'm going to get to that. Anyway, so New Moon Magic, 13 anti-capitalist tools for resistance and reenchantment from the authors of Missing Witches. I haven't read Missing Witches, but it's also a podcast, and I follow them on Instagram after discovering this. How did I discover this? From following Sherry Schoen, and she posted this. This is a brilliant, maybe the most brilliant book on witchy, crafty topics I've ever read. Now it's astonishingly good. I think I'm really just kind of awed by it. So let me read the back to you. In New Moon Magic, Missing Witches authors and podcast hosts reclaim the tools of witchcraft as ways and means of magic, tools imbued with power that disrupts commodification and resists capitalism. The authors introduce 13 new moon practices throughout the astrological signs, each paired with contemporary and historical witches who embody a specific art of the craft. Readers will learn about potions with Ceridwen and St. Hildegard von Bingen, divination with Lorenz and Harriet Tubman, with Lozen, and Harriet Tubman, and The Circle with Audre Lorde. So basically, what this book is, it's a lot of things, but what this book does is it uses each of the new moons and the sign of that new moon and chooses sort of a handful of mostly female, queer, non-binary people in history, some of whom were actively witches and some of whom can be considered witches in the work that they did, whether or not they themselves might have, right? It's so first of all, it's great to explore the idea of this book talks about so many folks. Like, I wish I now had made notes. Because I thought, this can be an easy thing. I never do book reviews. I'll just talk about the book. But it's like, Audre Lorde obviously is a witch in the context of this book because of the work. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's sort of viewing witchcraft, witchery, as a political thing, as a queer thing, as a feminist thing. I do think that straight cis men may find themselves left out of this, but I also think that because straight and gay cis men are so centered in so much media, just take the journey anyway. You know what I mean? Like, that's the point of this, is something else. And in fact, if you feel sort of left out of it, I think there's benefit to, like, if you are someone who feels left out of this, then you would benefit a lot from reading it in a weird way. I mean, I just love it. Like, um, the 13 moons, new moon in Aries, needles and knives, the new moon in Taurus, the body, new moon in Gemini, the garden, new moon in Cancer, dance, new moon in Leo, music, new moon in Virgo, ritual and ceremony, new moon in Libra, geometry, new moon in Scorpio, the circle, new moon in Sagittarius, potions and poisons, new moon in Capricorn, divination, new moon in Aquarius, the word, new moon in Pisces, art, and the 13th moon, technology, anarchy, and the web. I learned about myself as an artist in this book. I learned about myself as a political entity, as a spiritual entity, and I adored it. I adored it. Like, I really, really did. It's not what it looks like it is from the cover, and I think the one thing that I would say about this publisher is that, at least in this space, they need a better graphic designer. Sorry. Um, oh my god, I just loved it. So I mean, what I think it presents as in this cover is kind of like spells, and stuff. It's each month is a spell, but it's also a journey. It's a meditation. It's an exploration, and there are like rituals and languages, by which I mean sort of literatures or poems to explore in it. But it's just, I don't know. I read it right through. I think you could read it each month at the right time. I loved it so much. So big ups. So I found out about this book from reading this book. So this is Hoodoo for Everyone by Sherry Schoen, and AKA that Hoodoo lady. So she's on Instagram as that Hoodoo lady. I am a studier of all spirituality just in life. You know what I mean? It's the thing that interests me. In part because I don't have spirituality. Like, it's a thing that I have lacked since leaving the church when I was like 18. But I read a lot about it, and what I try to do where I can is read, materials by actual practitioners, right? So, recently on Instagram, I did a series of videos about like spooky time and sort of common tropes that are, Halloweeny, and I talked about Haitian voodoo and I talked about zombies. And one of the things I said is that it's very difficult to get authentic representation in media of Haitian voodoo because, and really it's Vodou, Voudou, I think. Anyway, because it's a way of life, it's not a thing to be documented. It's not a thing you have to write down and teach others how to do. You go through the thing. So what is out there a lot of the time is written by white initiates, maybe with or without the permission of their initiator, and anthropologists. And anthropology tends to look at the world through white gaze. And even, American anthropology, there's the one criticism of Norv Zeal Hurston, whom I love, so I don't really subscribe to this, is that she wasn't objective as an anthropologist, and she looked at like Haiti through American eyes, which, I think if you read her book, whatever. Anyway, the point is, a lot of it doesn't come from real practitioners. Zora Neale Hurston was initiated in a lot of practices, though. Anyway, so a lot of what's written about hoodoo in the United States, which is, hoodoo being a black spirituality that emerges out of enslavement, and sort of retentions of a lot of West African, in particular, traditions that were remembered, sort of blended with indigenous American or indigenous, spiritualities too. So it's tough to sort of get a picture of it that isn't painted through a lens of white gaze. And there are questions, and I think valid ones, about who is it for? Is hoodoo a closed practice? And I mean, I think the idea is yes, right? Because it emerges out of out of enslavement, right? It's a magical tradition that is liberation based with an eye toward, the lives of people impacted by enslavement and, all the awful things that are attendant with it. With some overlap into indigenous spirituality from the sort of the southeastern United States, or what is so called the United States now. So anyway, it is a fascinating practice, but I only have experience of reading it through Zora Neale Hurston because there aren't a lot of practitioners who are writing about it who are, descended from actual practitioners. Now, it's a complicated thing too because layered into that are Southern root workers and conjure. I would, from having read quite a lot about this stuff, I would wager that a lot of Southern root work is based on hoodoo and black spirituality and black magic in the sense of black Americans, not, black magic. That's a long preamble anyway to say this book, right? So I started seeing this book a lot. Like, it kept sort of hitting me in the face in places. It would show up, in book recommendations on Amazon. I would be in a bookstore completely not looking, and it would sort of smack me in the face. And I thought, oh, Hoodoo for everyone. Boy, what problematic, me wrote this. What white, cis guy wrote this book. And finally I was like, okay, look, let me look at the damn thing. So I did, and it's not written by a cis white guy. It's written by a queer black woman. And I'm going to read the back to you. Hoodoo is a folklore tradition created by and for African Americans in the southern United States. And before there were honey jars, red brick dust, and everything else you may associate with hoodoo, there was the need to be free. This is not the kitchen witch hoodoo you've seen on social media. It's magic for those who seek liberation and healing, for those who have been hurt, misunderstood, or cast aside. This is hoodoo updated. History, foundation, spell work, and spiritual guidance made accessible to everyone, inclusive of all backgrounds and genders. Written with 3 guiding hoodoo tenets in mind: intention, faith, and direction. Hoodoo for Everyone offers everything you need to know about the practice: rituals, conjure, root work, divination, herbs, plants, and ancestor work. Hoodoo for Everyone is for all readers called to hoodoo, new and experienced alike. For anyone seeking a natural spiritual practice, a connection to their history, or a deeper connection to non-judgmental life energy, Sherry Schoen offers a comprehensive guide to manifesting deliverance through hoodoo magic. So much in here. The first thing I want to say is that this is Sherry Schoen's Hoodoo for Everyone, by which I mean it is designed for everyone. It is not necessarily, I don't know how to use, I want to say traditional. It's traditional, but it's not. It's that Hoodoo lady, Sherry Schoen, made this a version of Hoodoo for everybody. Provided that you are willing to explore the history of racism in America, and what's fascinating about this book is it's very political, but I think she uses the word politics once, and it's in a quote from somebody. So it's not written, this is sort of overtly political, which I love. This is subversive in its politics, which I think is sometimes a good tactic because it tricks people into thinking, in ways they wouldn't normally. So this is a version of Hoodoo designed by Sherry Schoen for everybody seeking deliverance, seeking liberation, including social liberation, the liberation of the marginalized. And it's just really good. You know what I mean? Again, it's difficult in the United States at this point to separate a lot of magical traditions because of various things, like the fact that, a white person may have gone to a black conjurer and learned some stuff, and then that became Southern conjurer. I don't know. We don't know because no one was writing this stuff down. But a lot of modern Wicca and witchcraft is also inspired by a lot of Hoodoo and New Orleans voodoo. And so while Hoodoo, for example, and voodoo may be closed practices to some, it's also influenced, and there's a natural there's just an inevitability of influence. But what this book does is it says, okay, you're interested in Hoodoo. Let's let's make sure you understand what it is and where it came from, and that your hoodoo is also directed toward the liberation of people who are still marginalized, including queer people, people of color, women, etc. So it's modern approaches to magic, conjure, root work, and liberation. And in that vein, I cannot recommend it enough. Again, because if you're using hoodoo influenced magic, then again, I think it's the same thing with Kabbalah and tarot. I don't think you can separate them anymore. They are so inextricably linked. But what you can do is understand the history and acknowledge the true Kabbalah creators, and make sure that your divination is liberative of Judaism, for example, and honors that in the same way that your magical practices should also honor and benefit the betterment of life for the planet and for everybody. So what is really just amazing about these two books is the way that they do that, and I think Sherry Schoen's work. I think this book is so good, and again, I really recommend it if you are using those techniques anyway, because then it just gives you more history. It gives you personal history from her life and her spirits. You know what I mean? And just I just also find it a really generous book. As an invitation to something very personal and learned from her family. And I love that both of these books are very queer and feminist and intersectional. Just really, really good books, like unlike I've read in this field in a while. And then Sherry self-published a book called The Hoodoo Lady's Hoodoo Guide to the Bible. So if you don't know much about hoodoo, it's very linked to Christianity, Protestantism in particular, in the way that New Orleans voodoo is inseparable from Catholicism, and Haitian voodoo too. That is a thing that for someone like me who has a very complicated relationship to Christianity, but who was once deeply devout. My childhood, I wasn't an altar boy, but I was everything else. I read at mass, I sang in the choir, like I was just a good little Catholic boy. And I resent it. I resent the damage that it did to me, that faith. And I resent the sort of archaic lessons it teaches. I resent the political turmoil that we're seeing today as a result of that book, and the faiths that emerged from it. All of them. I think in many ways monotheism is the worst thing to have happen to humanity. That's another video. And I'm not Christian. I reject it. You know what I mean? Weirdly, I don't reject the Jesus parts because that was weirdly progressive, but it's just evil to me. And used to justify such horrible things. And then this book comes along and says, oh, you can reclaim the things that hurt you. You can take language from a book that was used to oppress you and change that language a little bit and make it a spell. I can't talk too much about it without giving away too much. So I'm going to be very general here. But the idea to me of taking that book and a passage from that book that was used to wound you and changing a word or two or adjusting a verb and turning it into an act of liberation was kind of mind-blowing. And I was in New Orleans a few weeks ago for vacation, my first actual vacation. And I was in the museum on either side of St. Louis Cathedral. The one that has the Mardi Gras and the Katrina exhibits. And I was standing in this loggia, waiting for my friends, and I was just looking out at the square, and there were all these tables set up of tarot card readers and fortune tellers right in front of the church. And I just had this moment of like, oh, of, you know, connecting it to this idea of like, oh, there's like this subversive reclamation of of Catholicism in New Orleans, that makes me go, oh, maybe I don't have to throw away the things that grabbed me and made me feel magic as a child, but I can throw away the other stuff, or I can take that and change some words and make it about deliverance. And I don't know where that's leading. It's something that it was just a very sort of interesting. I mean, New Orleans is a city that you sort of, I feel like, have those kinds of weird moments all the time. It's one of my favorite places because of that. Yeah. Anyway, so this is sort of, this came first, but the Hoodoo for Everybody what came second. Just for someone like me who's sort of trying to like understand my own cosmology, this idea of reclaiming and recycling what has been used to oppress you is very, very powerful and magical to me, and exciting. And yeah, I don't know. So just, these are three excellent, just really like sort of core touching books, I think, for me anyway, that I just found so magical. So magical. I think of someone doing an impression of Drew Barrymore on Saturday Night Live years ago. So magical. I can't do it. Anyway, so again, Hoodoo, that Hoodoo Ladies, the Hoodoo Guide to the Bible, and Hoodoo for Everyone, modern approaches to magic, conjure, root work, and liberation by Sherry Schoen, and New Moon Magic, 13 anti-capitalist tools for resistance and reenchantment by Riza Dickens and Amy Torok, hosts of the Missing Witches podcast, and they have another book called Missing Witches. Again, chef's kiss. Love these three books. Three of the best I've ever read in this spiritual space, whatever that word means. And I recommend them, and I recommend that you get them and share them and, you know, just enjoy them, and good stuff. All right. That's it for me. Take care, be good, and I hope to talk soon.